Da 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 da. Star Wars The Clone Wars is an all-CGI cartoon show which ran for 5 seasons on the Cartoon Network between 2008 and 2013, with its 6th and final season being released in early 2014 via digital distribution only. It is the longest-running Star Wars cartoon, vastly outstripping Star Wars droids and Star Wars Ewoks, clocking in at 121 episodes plus a theatrical film setting up the series events. Not to mention 5 video games, a slew of action figures and other merch, Dark Horse comics, novels, and 8 fully written but unfinished episodes available for viewing on StarWars.com. Whee! While the art style might not be for everyone, the animation in The Clone Wars is really, really good. As someone who watches a lot of cartoon shows and who likewise enjoys reading up on the technical aspects of their production, CGI's biggest limitation is the creation of assets. Every single object on screen has to be modeled, lit, textured, and then further fine-tuned to limit clipping, along with a bunch of other stuff which I'm glossing over for time. This is why most CG cartoons take advantage of a small cast size, reusing builds and often having them take place in limited or sparsely decorated sets. Clone Wars, by contrast, boasts a massive cast of distinctive character models even in its early episodes, taking place over various detailed settings with piles upon piles of weapons, vehicles, and other interactable objects. Particularly impressive when you consider how alien some of them are modeled to look. What's wrong with your face? What I'm driving at here is I never got a sense of limitation while watching the Clone Wars. Even the clones themselves have distinctive armor and faces. Plus, they were like that in the live-action movies. They were less distinctive even. We're seeing an alien galaxy here straight out of some twisted minds, and a computer's processing power or a staff's ability to shade objects isn't going to limit us. It's so dense, every single image has so much going on. Okay, so the show's technically impressive, but what about the plot? Set between the events of Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones and Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith in the same rough time period as the 2D 2003 TV series Star Wars Clone Wars, The Clone Wars follows the ongoing adventures of the Jedi and the clone armies battling the Separatists for control over colonized space, along with a myriad of other stories and conflicts which result from living in a galaxy at war. See, the Clone Wars isn't structured like your typical kids' action show, or any kids' show for that matter. With the exception of the ongoing progression of the war, there isn't an ongoing story arc connecting each episode in a direct sequence of events, but rather plot arcs of 2 to 5 episodes told in order with one-off stories mixed in between. Moreover, seasons and their content are not presented in chronological order. Several episodes from the 3rd season take place before events in the 1st season, and vice versa. Given this setup, there's not really the ability to have characters undergo traditional development or have escalating events. What the Clone Wars more allows for is character exploration and enriching of a massive universe with various types of planets, peoples, and cultures, but I understand that this isn't going to grab everyone. The closest the show gets to a classically developed protagonist is newcomer Ahsoka Tano, who serves as Anakin's Padawan and resident audience insert character. She starts off brash, headstrong, and immature, but slowly learns discipline, focus, and leadership skills. Lots and lots of leadership skills. While reactions to her were initially mixed, I don't think it's any surprise why she's become the series' most iconic cast member, and why fans have been clamoring for her so hard in subsequent Star Wars media. But major props have to be paid to Anakin Skywalker for perhaps one of the best character reinterpretations in media history. He is immensely more likable and sympathetic than his cinematic counterpart. Not that this is hard, but what can be hard is selling someone who is also really talented at combat and piloting, yet also realistically flawed and human, while still being endearing to the audience. And the cartoon pulls this off masterfully. Anakin is a handsome pile of contradictions, intelligent and fairly well trained in the Jedi ways, but still with a lot of room to grow. He is a proven tactician, but also prone to emotional outbursts and bullheadedness. He cares passionately about his friends, almost to the point of endangering his cause. Anakin doesn't like to lose, and he doesn't like to lose the people near him, even to the point that he seems to reject the reality of the situation around him. This type of characterization also breathes new life into his relationship with Padme, who stands as an interesting interesting character in her own right now. Ironically, the two spend most of their episodes apart, but in the times when they are together or are discussing their relationship, the despair of their situation becomes evident. Anakin is someone who has a lot of love and compassion, but someone who also doesn't have a problem with committing violence and murder if he feels it's the most expedient way to solve a problem. And given the nature of the conflict he currently lives in, this is often. And that's the thing, the Clone Wars is really good at selling what I think these characters, all these characters, were originally meant to be. Keep in mind that this is just me speculating. But the prequels were supposed to be a tale of collapse and tragedy, right? A glimmering republic collapses under the weight of its own pomp, success, and secrets, and the chosen one, Anakin, is a metaphor for all of this. That's a great concept, but it means nothing if I'm not invested in the characters or the world. Luckily, like as in so many other facets of life, cartoons are here to fill the void, here to bring closure. Not that everyone comes out improved or unchained. There's a bit of the kitty grade fever going on. Like, okay, Jabba the Hutt, notorious gangster and stylized representation of immense greed and power. No stranger to every manner of horror and committer of unacceptable actions against other sentient creatures. Plus, an example of a whole different type of evil than what the Empire represented. In Clone Wars, he's a doting father, rarely seen without the company of his adorable little baby Boo son. In fact, most of the Hutts seem to have gotten hit with the big old point at them and laugh stick. It's funny because alternative gender performance. It's weird because overall the Clone Wars doesn't really skimp on darker content. There's a plethora of on-screen deaths via shootings and stabbings. You've got torture, human trafficking, child abuse, a Jar Jar makeout scene, mutilation, brainwashing, and so on. In the Clone Wars, war is this massive oppressive thing that constantly weighs down on people's minds, both within and without the battlefield. An entity that only seems to grow regardless of any attempts to smother it, and which is reshaping all facets of life around it into an environment which better serves even more war. I mentioned before how the Clone Wars doesn't really have a traditional story arc, and it also encounters difficulty in creating investment or payoff based around what we know will be canon. Like, you generally watch a TV show not fully knowing what the ending will be, but hoping that your heroes will achieve their goals. But we know that no matter how many plans Padme makes, no matter how many droids get sliced up, no matter how many missions Ahsoka completes, we're still gonna end up in the same place at Galactic Conquest, Death Star, tell your sister I don't like sand, etc. Regardless of how the wheel spins, the destination is always the same. Sometimes it's kind of a bummer. Don't get me wrong, The Clone Wars is great, and I had a great time watching it, but there were times when I wondered who this show was for. The dark content and oppressive atmosphere would probably turn off younger children, not to mention the non-traditional story structure, but the emphasis on merchandise makes me think that a lot of kids were watching it. But this show was popular enough to justify 5 seasons on Cartoon Network, and I was always seeing toys for it, so it clearly found a lucrative audience somehow. I mention all of this specifically because in fall 2014, only 7 months after the digital release of Clone Wars 6th and final season, Star Wars Rebels premiered on Disney XD as a sequel series reuniting some of the same creative team along with Greg, Gargoyle, Spectacular Spider-Man, Young Justice, Wiseman, but under the Mouse House's jurisdiction as part of Star Wars' status as a Disney subsidiary. Now, Star Wars Rebels is infinitely more accessible than the Clone Wars, especially for a younger and general audience. There is one cast of easily understood characters who undergo measured development with each episode telling a complete story while also contributing to a season-long plot arc. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Each stanza flows into the next one. Though I think it's fair to criticize it for treading well-worn territory. Like, stop me if you've heard this one. An orphan scamp with a big case of the special hooks up with a band of noble outlaws consisting of a haunted father figure, a no-nonsense mom, a spunky girl, a cat, an orange mascot, and Kevin Bacon. They run low-level griefing and smuggling missions against an oppressive and unambiguously evil force, all while larger events brew in the background. Nothing wrong with sticking to the tried and true, but at this point, the most radical thing about Rebels is its racial diversity. Or I guess you could say, what's right with your face? Rebels has a lighter tone than the Clone Wars. While there is still violence, tension, and death, and adorable little Empire youth, the bad guys get defanged a fair bit. The Clone Wars had an impressive gallery of wonderfully sick and twisted monsters, the kind of villains you could depend upon to cause murder and mayhem, but also be kinda cool. The coolest, of course, being Cad Bane. But in Rebels, to better focus attention on our merry band of misfits, the Empire is reduced to a thinner section overseeing an out-of-the-way planet, and for the most part are pretty incompetent. Like, yeah, there's this guy, he's scary, but not that interesting. And then there's this lady, who's interesting, but not that scary. You see the problem. Things get better once Tarkin shows up. Tarkin always makes everything better. I could pick on the animation a little bit too. We've got great character designs and great character animation, but there's a notable scaling back in terms of complexity of sets and assets on screen, especially when you consider that the Clone Wars started in 2010. Like, this was Clone Wars' version of a spaceport, and this is Rebels. Taste is subjective, though taste is everything. Image is nothing. Obey your thirst. The Clone Wars is currently available via streaming on Netflix, and all seasons can be purchased on DVD and Blu-ray. Star Wars Rebels is also currently available for streaming on Netflix, and it's been confirmed it will get a DVD and Blu-ray release later in 2015. Not to mention that the second season, as of this video posting, is currently underway. Yes, they're different, yes, they have different components, but they're worth your time to at least check out. Or don't check either of them out, and instead watch Strange Magic, George Lucas's latest cinematic jukebox musical tale about bug fairy love, available now on DVD and HD streaming off Amazon. Sugar pie, honey bunch, you know that I love you.